This is Lolly's Quilt Shop. We have Lynne here who is going to quilt, show you how to quilt on the embroidery machine. But we also want to introduce this class coming in the end of August, so keep an eye out. This is an embroidery class with the Cup of Cheer through Kimberbell, and we'll post more about it later. So Lynne's going to show you the process of using your embroidery machine for quilting.
Hi, today we're going to do single block with quilting, and we're going to do the entire quilt block in the machine. And when we are finished, we will have a quilt block that looks like this, and we will take 4 of these so that we can make a perfectly pieced finished project that will look like this. Now, as you can see, there are several projects that can be done with this same quilt block, and today we've got 2 of these finished, and we're going to finish 2 of them in the hoop. So the first thing I'm going to do is I have loaded my project in the machine, the quilt block. I'm going to attach my hoop, and on the stabilizer I'm going to run my first step, which is a placement for my batting. Now the instructions give you different sizes for a 2-inch, a 4-inch, a 6-inch, or an 8-inch block. Today we're doing the 4-inch block, so I have all of my fabric cut out as well as my 5x5 piece of batting. So now that my machine has run the batting placement line, I'm simply going to place my batting down and let the machine run the placement stitches to stitch it down. Now before I started, I also cut out all of my pieces, and I have them in order so that as we run through the steps in the machine, each one of my blocks will look exactly the same. Now that the machine has finished tacking down my batting, I'm going to cut around the edge. You want to be careful not to cut your stitches. And if you kind of hold the batting up, give it a little tension, it helps the scissors to run smoothly and fairly close to the edge of the stitches. Now don't worry if they look a little, well, wonky. Like you can see, it's not perfectly straight, but there will be fabric covering all of that. So you just quickly run around the entire block. Now once that is done, I'm going to put my hoop back into the machine, and I'm going to allow the machine to run the placement stitches that'll show you exactly how your block is going to be arranged. Now this came from the Perfectly Pieced, which is ME Time Delivered, which is through Kimberbell, and as you can see, the instructions go step by step. So we've loaded the embroidery machine, we've stitched the batting placement line, we've put down our batting. So you can see each step is laid out for you so you don't make a mistake. Of course, our machine has decided we're going to go backwards, so we catch that again. And now it's going to run the placement for the fabric. We now have our piecing template on the batting, and so the first thing, I'm going to pick up my first piece of fabric and I'm going to lay it right side up on this first block here as the instructions tell us. We are on step number 7, and so it's telling me to lay it right side up. Now, one thing I do want to make sure is that I have enough fabric covering my sewing placement there, so that when I am ready to stitch them together, I have the 1/4 inch seam allowance. So the next step is going to tack this fabric down. I'm going to remove it from the hoop, or remove the hoop from the machine, sorry. And I'm going to trim along this line. Again, kind of hold your fabric up to give it a little bit of tension. This does not have to be a beautiful cut because it will be covered by another piece of fabric. I'm going to place my hoop back in the machine. And once I've done that, my instructions tell me that this line is a cut line as well as a placement line for the next piece of fabric. So I'm going to lay the next piece of fabric wrong side up and allow the machine to sew. So I'm going to place the fabric here, and I'm going to allow the machine to stitch it down. Once the machine has stitched this down, I'm going to fold this over and I'm going to finger press it, getting it as neat as I can, before allowing the machine to run the next placement stitch, which is going to go across here. So now I'm going to remove this from the hoop. Again, this is a placement line as well as a cut line. So I'm going to cut the fabric here. And I'm going to leave this little tab so that it's a part of my seam allowance to give it a little bit of extra strength when you sew your blocks together. So next thing I'm going to do is get my next piece of fabric, and I'm going to place it wrong side up over, making sure it covers over that placement line. And then I'm going to allow the machine to sew it down. So you're going to continue to do this. As you can see, you go step by step and keep placing, and you just keep placing and keep trimming according to your steps. And so I have another block that's a little bit further along, and I'll show you how it looks when it finishes in the hoop. So I have my last 2 pieces. As you see, this is the red piece that we were on the last block. Then you would place another white piece. And now the machine has stitched a straight line here. I'm going to lay my long piece down. And it also needs to be wrong side up. Again, I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to finger press it down, getting it as tight as I can. I'm going to allow the machine to run a placement line and tack this piece down. Now this is the placement line for my last piece of fabric, so I'm going to lay my last piece of fabric down, making sure that it covers the entire placement line, and then stitch my final placement. I'm also going to finger press this over, and the last thing we're going to do is allow the machine, it's going to run and tack down all of this loose fabric on the edges, and then it's going to quilt my block. So now all of my fabric is tacked down, and I'm going to start the step. As you can see on the machine, it's going to do this wonderful quilting on top of my block, and then the block will be complete. So while this is running, I'll show you again, this is what the finished block will look like. You see you've got it perfectly pieced. All of your pieces match, your points are perfect. You don't have any mistakes in it. The machine has done it all for you. And then you have finished your block by quilting. And once you get all of your pieces together, you will be able to sew them together, and you can sew them in different ways to make different patterns. It can look like this. You can put 4 of those together, which is what we're going to do to finish this. Or you could put them this way. You've got just endless choices of fabrics and colors and how you want to put your blocks together. You could make an entire quilt. You could make a table runner. There's just an endless possibility of things that you can do with these little finished quilt blocks. Again, this is through ME Time Delivered, and it is a Kimberbell product. And this is single block with quilting. As you can see, there's lots of projects that you can make, and so with these kinds of blocks, you can just let your imagination run wild and complete whatever kind of project you want, and make sure that they are perfect and each block is exactly the same every time. And as you can see, the machine has finished. All we have left to do is take that out of the hoop and cut a 1/4 inch away for our seam allowance, and then we can start to put our projects together. Thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed our class today. We hope to see you again at Lolly's Quilt Shop in Clifton Forge.
Thank you.